I think I can never take Eddie Deezen.
Welcome to the Video Store Geek Podcast, where your friendly neighborhood world film geek Albert Valentine talks about films made and released during the golden age of the VHS era.
Hello, fellow tape heads. This is your indie world cinema film geek, Albert Valentine. And of course, this is the Video Store Geek Podcast, where I talk about old films made or released during the VHS era. And we are officially ending Surfing in June with Surf 2, released in 1983, directed by Randall Badatt and starring Eddie Deezen, Eric Stoltz, Jeffrey Rogers, Corin Bohrer, Terry Kaiser, Lyle Waggoner. A whole bunch of people are in this movie. Cleavon Little. It is a wild hybrid of 1960s beach party movies and I want to say sci-fi films from like the 70s. And I gotta tell you, this is the first time watch for me. I've never seen this movie. I've heard about it so many times, but I've never gotten to see it. And I finally had a chance to see it thanks to Vinegar Syndrome and their 2021 director's cut. And I gotta tell you, this is one of the wildest and wackiest movies I've ever seen. And we're gonna talk about it and give you a little trivia like I always do here. So we're gonna get right into it as we wrap up Surfing in June here on the Video Store Geek Podcast. So let's do it. So the film is about these two guys, Chuck and Bob, and they're played by Eric Stoltz and Jeffrey Rogers. Now, of course, this was right before Eric Roberts was originally chosen to play Marty McFly in Back to the Future, but of course he got fired and was replaced by Michael J. Fox. But this was after his film debut as a surfer, go figure, in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. And this was also before his breakout roles in The Wildlife, which is kind of like a semi-sequel to Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and Some Kind of Wonderful. So, and Jeffrey Rogers, horror fans will know him for his role in Friday the 13th Part 3, which was shot in 3D, but there's more on that in a little bit. Anyway, there's these two surfer guys, and they have these girlfriends, Cindy Lou and Lindy Sue, which for some reason reminds me of they could be living in Whoville, but they're played by Corinne Bohrer and Lucinda Dooling. And anyway, they like to go surfing on the beach. They got a friend named um they got this friend who's named Johnny, who's kind of like the kind of reminds he kind of looks like Joe Rubbo from Last American Virgin, but he's more like he's the typical big guy who just likes to eat random things and toss things around. At one point, he's tossing his own brother out the house so they can go to the beach together. And they just like to go surfing and have fun. And at the beginning of the movie, it's set at a high school pep rally, at their high school pep rally, and they get so bored with it. They try to escape, and they're stopped by their science teacher, Dr. Beaker, played by Peter Isaacs, and then we have the principal, played by Cleavon Little, Principal Daddy-O, who's also the head of the town council. But that's not even the worst thing that's about to happen. Of course, it's all about surfing, having fun, but someone's not too happy about it. And it goes by the guy of Menlo Schwartzer, and he's played by Eddie Deezen, the quintessential nerd actor. You see, years ago, Menlo wanted to be a surfer. He was, he always felt nerdy, but he always wanted to play like the hip surfer. He wanted to be one of those guys. Until one day, a practical joke from surfers during lunch has given him a mindset to seek revenge. So, conspiring, unbeknownst to them, with Chuck's and Bob's dads, who are the proprietors of Buzz Cola, Menlo has decided to taint the Buzz Cola in order to get revenge on the surfers by turning them into punk rock zombies. And the first two to fall prey under this are local surfer airhead Jocko O'Finley, played by the late great Tom Villard, and his buddy Becker, played by Ralph Seymour. So they're the first two. You can call them Patient Zero and Patient One. And all of a sudden, Buzz Cola started starts becoming the big hit. It's kind of like the Stuff or the Tenafly Viper. But all of a sudden, some of the local surfers and high schoolers start turning into zombies with a punk rock edge. And of course, all havoc starts to wreak. But meanwhile, Chuck and Bob are trying to figure out what the whole story is. Meanwhile, you have Menlo's girlfriend, Sparkle, played by Linda Carriage. And turns out that she's not really enthused with the plot of, her boyfriend Menlo. And Menlo threatens to turn her back into this nerdy girl because at this point, Sparkle is like drop dead gorgeous. But we soon learn that when Menlo says that, it turns out that we possibly get the idea that Sparkle was once a nerd like him. And what happens is there's this big fight between Chuck and Bob's dads and Jocko's dad, who's a seller of beans. And he's also a photographer. And he's hysterically played by the great Terry Kaiser. I can't get enough of Terry Kaiser. I've been seeing a lot of him lately. I rewatched Mannequin 2, where he played the sorcerer and his descendant, Count Spretzel, with the big hairy mole on his face. I recently saw him in Mutilator 2, where he played Jack Chatham, the guy who played Big Ed in the Mutilator, the original film. It's a meta sequel. If you haven't seen it, check it out on Tubi. But and then I also saw him in Friday the 13th Part 8, a bunch of other things. But this is one of his funniest roles. At Weekend at Bernie's, I gotta mention that as well. But Surf 2, he's really funny in this because every time he just comes up with this little idea, his wife is all over him like crazy. And it's so funny the way she's like, oh, it's so great. That's so great. And it's just ridiculous. Meanwhile, Tom and Bob's moms are played by Ruth Buzzy and Brandis Kemp, and they're like drunk for half the film. I'm not joking. They act like the drunken mothers in half of this movie because anytime something crazy is about to get explained or something, crazy happens, they're coming out totally drunk and messed up. And there's this really funny scene where it's a split screen between Chuck and Bob's houses, and their moms and dads are talking the exact same dialogue with Chuck and Bob talking the dialogue too, like synchronously. And it's really funny to see this because it's just hysterical the way it's shot, but it's really well done. There's also the police chief, Chief Boyardee, played by Lyle Waggoner, and he's the dumbheaded police chief who everything is over his head, and his deputy Inspector Underwear, and I'm serious, that is his name, is played by the great Ron Palillo of Welcome Back, Kotter fame. You might know him for the voice of Rubik the Amazing Cube, in the cartoon. And of course, he was Jason's first victim in my favorite installment of Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives. So there's that. But all this chaos is happening. And when Chuck and Bob realize that something's up with these surfers or these punk rock zombies, they get help not just from Sparkle, but Mr. Beaker has an idea of what's going on. And this just leads to all chaotic time at not just a beach party, but also a surf contest that Buzz Cola is supposed to be sponsoring and the town council. And of course, everything goes down at that point. So it makes you wonder what's going to happen with everything. How does everything play out? But I gotta say this, of seeing this movie, I understand that Eddie Deezen is kind of like the villain of this film as the mad scientist Menlo, wanting revenge. But I think I can never take Eddie Deezen ever seriously as a villain. And I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm just saying, and I think he knows it too, that he does it in such a funny way. Playing this geeky mad scientist who has a hatred for surfers, but yet he kind of secretly still likes the lifestyle, but he's hell bent on his revenge. But it's just the way he does things in this film, and he gets a little sarcastic. And at one point, he's doing this like this celebratory dance, which just came out of comes out of nowhere, And from my understanding, Randall Badot let some of the actors get to do their own thing. They get to do a lot of improvisation. I won't be surprised if celebratory dance was one of those things. But I can never take him seriously as a villain. And funny enough, if you've seen a 1978 film called Laser Blast, he actually is supposed to be playing a serious bully type in this film named Froggy. And he was like the second in command of the real big bully, but still, you cannot take him seriously as a villain. Although you can, the closest you could say is the Polar Express when he was the know-it-all. He kind of comes off as a spoiled brat. But other than that, you cannot take Eddie Deezen seriously as a villain. He is the quintessential nerd actor. And that's why this film works because it's a spoof, but it's also an homage to these 1960s beach party movies that we talked about in our last episode with Back to the Beach, because that was the reunion of Frankie and Annette. But what Randall Badot did was really cool, like bringing in the punk rock culture and um, making it kind of like a horror comedy, basically. But this was actually a funny horror comedy. Like there's not really, it's not bloody, it's not like crazy, it's not they're eating people, nothing like that. It's just basically like surfers taking on these zombified punk rockers, basically. That's what it is. And they do it through surfing to and I gotta tell you, this is one of the most kick-ass soundtracks I've ever heard because you got Oingo Boingo, you got the Beach Boys, you got the Ventures, you got Talk Talk, and the end credits rolling. I was like, holy crap, I actually loved it. Like, I love Talk Talk, and hearing their eponymous song playing in the end credits was freaking awesome. I mean, this is 80s this is 80s glory, and I love it. This is 80s films in all its glory altogether, and I absolutely love this film. And like I said, this was a first time watch for me. I've never seen it, but it was so goofy, but yet so much fun to watch. I couldn't take my eyes off it. I actually watched it after my first watch. I decided to watch it one more time in case I missed anything. But overall, this was a fun movie. So yeah, I think this is a good time to get into some trivia about this because there's quite a few little factoids I didn't know about watching this, aside from the improvisation that Randall Bladot let some of the actors have. But we're gonna get right into the trivia here. So, funny enough, if you want to know where this idea came from, Randall Bladot himself was a surfer, and he suffered an injury, and during he was taking medications, and while on painkillers, he came up with the idea for this film. He wanted to bring punk rock culture of the '70s, but while he was feeling the effects of the medication he was on, he had the idea of a film where it was a surf movie, but it would be described as, in his own words, Frankie and Annette go to hell. And eventually he decided to write the script. And when he did, his agent saw it and said it was the biggest piece of trash he ever wrote. And it just made it, and it was originally called Surf Death, the movie. This was the first title. So then Randall kept going with the screenplay and he decided, you know what, he's going to try to find anyone who's willing to make this movie. He renamed it Surf Trash, and then eventually he found two producers who were willing to put up the financing for the film, two independent film producers. And upon that, he decided to call it Surf 2. And I believe in the trailer it says the final installment of the Surf trilogy. Now it makes you wonder, where the hell is Surf 1 and Surf 3? Doesn't exist. It's a totally goofball title. It's like such a great title for a film because it makes you wonder, where's Surf 1 and Surf 3? There isn't any. Just letting you know, there's only Surf 2. Surf 2 is the only film. Keep that in mind as you're listening to this and you decide to check this movie out. There's no Surf 3, just Surf 2. Remember that. So anyway, it was sold at the Cannes Film Festival in 1982 to Arista Films, who also released a few years later one of my favorite soccer films, Hot Shot. And originally, the idea was to shoot the film in 3D because it was starting to become a thing again. And at this time, Friday the 13th did was doing 3D. Unfortunately, though, with the budget they had, it was too costly, so they decided not to shoot the film in 3D. But yet they did some shots where it looks like it could have been done with 3D photography, which is pretty cool. So there's that. Um, Menlo Schwartzner, the villain of our mad scientist, was actually originally named Stinky Schwartzer, but Eddie Deezen persuaded Randall to change that name because he thought Stinky was a really terrible name. And to be honest with you, I think Menlo works better here as a scientist type rather than Stinky. So I think it's a lot better sense here that that name was better. So here's another piece of trivia that you should know that we have an appearance in the director's cut from the legendary king of surf guitar himself, Dick Dale. Because what happened was Dick Dale shot a cameo scene and it was ultimately cut from the theatrical release. So we never got to see it, but the gang over at Vinegar Syndrome, they got to release Randall's director's cut, the way he wanted the film to be seen from everyone in 2021, and we got Dick Dale's cameo in the film. And you got to where even Menlo starts to appreciate that surf culture where he says something along the lines of, "Oh man, that Dick Dale, he's great. That's what I'm scared of." Because he's starting to embrace the surf culture again, despite his hatred for surfers. So that's a totally ironic thing. And as mentioned, as I said, there's a lot of improvisation in this film, especially from Peter Isaacson, the actor who plays Dr. Beaker here. Um, he got to do a lot of his own improvisation in the film. It's a lot of films. So anyway, Surf 2 was filmed in 29 days in 1983 during the summer of 83, and they released it. They finished it that fall. And they it was a no studio wanted to touch this film because um they wanted to the studios, of course, at this time, this was the early 1980s, they wanted all the TNA and this and the sex stuff, and they wanted to do that, but Randall Butout was forced to put those in, and he wasn't happy about it. But I will say this: there was actually, and if you see the director's cut, the most nudity you actually see in the film are two girls who go topless. That's it. Other than that, he's just like it does, because he felt like the reshoots didn't fit the tone of the film, and it just felt like um it just didn't make sense. But luckily, the theatrical version runs, I believe, 90 minutes, but the director's cut, his Bad Its True Form, is actually at 100 minutes. It's 10 minutes longer, and the film premiered at the Coronet Theater in Los Angeles, but then it got a limited theatrical release on January 13th, 1984, and it was marketed as I mentioned, Surf to the End of the Trilogy. And then the promoters later released it with titles like Surf to The Nerds Strike Back because of the success of Revenge of the Nerds later on. And in Spain, it's actually called Beach Madness or Locura de Playa. And a 25th anniversary screening of the film was uh, presented at the famous New Beverly Cinema on April 17th, 2009. And it was hosted by the Alamo Drafthouse, and in attendance were Badat, Eddie Deezen, and some of the other crew members. So, as for this VHS release, it was in January 1985 through Media Home Entertainment, and they kept the rights until their operations ended in 2000 in 1992. And this was the theatrical cut. This is not the director's cut. Um, and Of course, the director's cut came on July 2021 by Vinegar Syndrome. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. So, and this movie was bashed. People hated this movie. Leonard Maltin, gave it a 1.5 out of 5. He said the best joke title is the best joke is the title. People didn't really like this movie. And the film critics, I should say, the film critics hated this film, but it gained a following in the audience. And had I seen this at this young age of almost 5 years old, I would have definitely enjoyed this movie. And I did enjoy this movie 4 decades later seeing this. So let's see, I'm gonna give Surf 2 here because Surf 2 definitely is fun and it's wacky. And that's what it's meant to be. Randall Badot. This is the director's cut. I didn't see the theatrical cut, and I don't think I plan to at this point. But I'm going to give this movie a solid A minus because I had so much fun with this movie watching. I love the improvisation. The cast was great. I mean, seeing Eric Stoltz before his breakout again, playing a surfer again after Fast Times. And the surf sequences were pretty cool. It's a meshing of the green screen and the real life surfing, and the soundtrack is awesome. Tom Villard's hysterical when he's in zombie mode. Eddie Deezen, like I said, you can't take him as a villain seriously, and he knew it, which is why he did it. He played this role the way he did, because you cannot take him as a villain that seriously. He's just too damn funny, and like I said, he is the definitive nerd actor. So definitely keep that in mind. If you see Surf 2, do yourself a favor, just see it as a popcorn film. Don't go into like a critical analysis of the film. It's not even worth it. Just go have fun with it. If you're a surf movie fan, just have fun with this movie. Just enjoy the craziness of Surf 2 because I sure as heck did. Well, that is it. We are done surfing in June. And I want to thank the North Shore. I want to thank Back to the Beach, and I want to thank Surf 2. You got these are 3 great films. I was so glad to have covered them this month. And usually I go bi-weekly here, but I'm actually gonna do the next episode next week, July 6th, because we're going dancing in July. And I'm not talking Dirty Dancing. Well, then again, I could be talking about a little bit of Dirty Dancing, but not that Dirty Dancing. But on July 6th, I'm going back to my family roots of Puerto Rico because we're going to be talking about the 1988 film Salsa, starring former Menudo member turned singer-songwriter Draco Rosa in his film debut as a salsa dancer in the streets of Los Angeles. And of course, who made this film? Canon. So we'll be talking about that next week, July 6th. Same video store time, same video store channels. So until then, this is your friendly neighborhood video store film geek, Albert Valentin, saying be kind, rewind, and as always, stay awesome. See you next week, guys.
Thank you for listening to the Video Store Geek Podcast. Don't forget to check out worldfilmgeek.com for the latest reviews, interviews, and news in the world of indie and global cinema. And see you on the next episode of the podcast. Stay awesome, film geeks.